When the maid opened her mouth and spoke perfect Japanese, the entire hotel froze. Then the truth came out. Nobody noticed her at first. Not really. She walked into the Grand Marlowe Hotel in Lafayette, Louisiana on a Wednesday morning, wearing a cream silk trench coat that shimmered slightly under the lobby lights. Her hair was jet black, tied neatly at the nape of her neck. She wore no makeup, no jewelry, only a small designer handbag hanging from her wrist like it didn't weigh anything at all. The doorman opened the door and greeted her with a smile. She smiled back politely, bowed slightly, and walked straight to the front desk. That's when things got, complicated. "Hi, welcome to the Grand Marlowe. Checking in?" the young clerk asked, already clicking at the keyboard. The woman tilted her head, furrowed her brow slightly, and pulled out her phone. She tapped something quickly, held it up, and a robotic voice said, "Yes, reservation. Emiko Tanaka." The clerk blinked, tried again. "Can I see your ID?" She understood that, apparently, nodded, slid over a passport and credit card. The check-in process took nearly 15 minutes. She tried using her phone for translations, but the voice kept messing up key words. At one point, she tried to ask for a room with a bathtub, but the app said, "I want big water box." The clerk glanced around awkwardly. Other guests waiting behind her started shifting and sighing. A man in a polo shirt muttered under his breath, "This is going to take forever." She didn't react, just smiled, gave a small bow, and continued trying. Once she had her key card, she bowed again, twice, and wheeled her suitcase toward the elevator. Her heels made no sound on the marble floor. Nobody really said anything then, but the looks started. Later that day, the staff started whispering, "She doesn't speak a word of English? She must be loaded. Did you see that bag?" She couldn't even ask for towels this morning. Something's off. By evening, most of the front desk crew, bellhops, and housekeeping knew about the guest in room 409, the Japanese woman, Emiko Tanaka, always polite, always quiet, always alone, and never speaking English. By Friday, the hotel manager, Mr. Preston, was getting irritated. "I can't run a place like this if my staff can't even communicate with our guests. I don't care how much she paid, someone needs to get through to her," he said during a meeting in the back office. Nobody volunteered. There was no translator on staff, and no one, not a single person, knew she was worth over $15 million. Not that it should have mattered. But Emiko's silence started bothering people more than anything she'd said. By Saturday, Emiko had become the quiet ghost of the Grand Marlowe. She left her room early each morning and returned just before sunset. Never spoke, never smiled too much, just that same polite bow. People assumed she was sightseeing or maybe shopping, but nobody ever saw her carrying bags. She always walked back empty-handed, her pace steady, her eyes lowered, like she was searching for something on the sidewalk. In the dining room, she'd sit alone by the window, eating slowly, carefully, almost like she didn't want to be seen. The waiters kept a distance, not out of respect, but discomfort. She'd point at items on the menu and nod. That was enough to get by, but not enough to make her welcome. One night, as she left her table, a couple near the entrance whispered just loud enough to be heard. "She's probably just rich and rude. Or shady. You never know with these foreign types." She paused at the door for a second, then walked out. Emiko never said anything, but her eyes caught everything. By Sunday, the hotel staff had started treating her like a problem. Quiet resentment simmered under polite customer service voices. Her bed was made sloppily one morning. The shampoo in her bathroom wasn't refilled like it should have been. A staff member claimed she was probably too rich to care anyway. It was around 3 p.m. that day when the tipping point came. Emiko walked down to the front desk holding an empty towel rack from her room. She stood in line quietly behind two guests, waiting for her turn, holding the rack gently like it was a child's toy. When it was finally her turn, she placed it gently on the counter and smiled. "Towel, please," she said slowly, accent heavy. The receptionist blinked, confused. "Ma'am, I'm not sure what you're saying." Emiko held up her phone again. This time it said, "I apologize, may I receive one more towel for the bathing process?" The woman behind the desk chuckled under her breath. "Right, housekeeping brings those. You don't have to come down here." But Emiko just kept smiling and pointing to the phone. The line behind her was growing. Someone coughed dramatically. The receptionist gave a forced smile, picked up the phone, and buzzed the housekeeping floor. "Can someone bring a towel to 409? "Yeah." Again, thanks. Emiko nodded graciously, bowed slightly, and walked away. As she disappeared into the hallway, a young bellhop named Richie leaned toward the receptionist. Why doesn't she just speak English like everyone else? That line stuck in the air like the smell of burned toast. None of them knew she'd heard it, but someone else had. Celeste Monroe had been cleaning rooms on the 4th floor for 2 years, kept her head down, got her work done, never caused problems. She was the type people didn't think twice about. Not in a rude way, just the way you don't notice the elevator music after a while. Celeste had just finished restocking the carts when she heard voices by the vending machines near room 409. A couple of maintenance guys were talking, loud. I swear, man, she's got all this money, and she can't even ask for a towel the right way. What's she even doing here? I heard she's some kind of heiress. But why Lafayette? Weird, right? Maybe she's running from something. They laughed. The soda machine made a loud thunk, and one of them walked away sipping a Sprite. Celeste didn't say anything. She just looked at the closed door of room 409. She knocked gently. Emiko opened the door slowly, just a few inches. She looked surprised at first, but then relaxed when she saw the cleaning uniform. Celeste smiled. Towel? Emiko nodded eagerly, stepping aside. Celeste stepped in. She moved quietly, efficiently, refolded the linens, restocked the bathroom. As she turned to leave, Emiko looked down at the ground and said, very softly, in heavily accented English, Thank you. Celeste turned around, paused, and then, without thinking, said in near-perfect Japanese, Don't worry about it. I've got you. Emiko froze. Then her eyes widened. You speak Japanese? She said slowly in her native tongue. Celeste smiled. Yes, fluently. I lived in Okinawa from the time I was 8 until I was 16. My dad was stationed there. Emiko covered her mouth with both hands. She looked like she might cry or laugh or both. You are the first person, Emiko said, to understand me here. They sat down, right there on the edge of the freshly made bed. The conversation was hesitant at first, then flowed like a dam breaking. Celeste learned that Emiko had come to Lafayette not for business, but for something personal, something delicate. Emiko's younger brother had died in the U.S. 10 months earlier. He'd been living here under a different name, trying to distance himself from their powerful family. He had died alone, unclaimed. Emiko only found out by accident, through a piece of mail forwarded to their family's Tokyo home. No one else in her family cared, but she did. I had to come, Emiko said, to see where he lived, to understand him. But I am not brave. English is hard, and no one helped me. I thought maybe I was invisible here. Celeste reached out, touched her hand gently. You're not invisible. You just walked into a room full of people who weren't ready to see you. They sat in silence for a moment, then Emiko laughed, a small, tired laugh. You're Japanese. Better than some of my cousins. Celeste laughed too, but just outside the door, someone else had been listening. The next morning, Celeste got to work earlier than usual. She didn't say much to the other housekeepers, just grabbed her cart and made her way to room 409. Her hands were already gripping the extra towels, but she brought more than those. She brought quiet comfort. Emiko opened the door before she could knock. Good morning, she said carefully, in English. Celeste smiled. You're practicing already. Emiko nodded. Only for you. Inside the room, the two women sat again, this time at the little round table by the window. Celeste brought her break-time coffee. Emiko poured tea from her own set she'd packed from home. The difference in their lives couldn't have been more obvious. One woman wore a worn housekeeping uniform, the other wore silk. But in that room, none of it mattered. They were just two women, trying to make sense of the weight they carried. Celeste sipped from her cup, thoughtful. You said your brother came here to get away from your family? Emiko nodded, eyes cast out the window. My family is powerful. My father owns shipping. My mother is like society queen. My brother Kenji was not like them. He was quiet, kind. He liked music. He hated pretending. So he left. No one stopped him. But you missed him. Emiko blinked hard. He sent me a letter once. Only one. He said, America is noisy, but it's honest. I can breathe here. I didn't understand it then. I do now. Celeste leaned forward. Where was he living when he passed? A few blocks from here. Tiny apartment. The building is falling. He had no visitors. No funeral. Celeste swallowed. That's why you came. You didn't come to tour anything. Emiko shook her head. I came to find him, even if he's already gone. I wanted to know who he became, what kind of man he was when no one was watching. For a moment, Celeste didn't say anything. Then she said, Do you want me to go with you? To the apartment? Emiko looked up. You would do that? Celeste nodded. Of course. Sometimes it's easier to carry something when you don't have to carry it alone. That afternoon, they walked side by side through the city. Nobody looked twice. Nobody thought it strange to see a wealthy Japanese woman and a hotel maid walking together. The apartment was just as Emiko described, cracked walls, a dented mailbox, and an old buzzer that barely worked. They stood in the narrow hallway for a while, not saying anything. Then Emiko opened the door. There wasn't much inside. A futon mattress on the floor, a few books in English and Japanese, a guitar in the corner, slightly dusty, and on the table, a single framed photo. Emiko and Kenji as children, in school uniforms, both smiling, wind in their hair. Emiko picked it up with shaking hands. He kept this, she whispered, all this time. Celeste stood quietly by the door, letting her take it in. He had nothing, Emiko said, but he kept this. Celeste stepped forward. He didn't have nothing. He had that. And you, and whatever piece he came here to find. Emiko sat on the edge of the bed, tears finally spilling from her eyes. Not loud sobs, just quiet, aching grief. Celeste sat beside her. You know, she said gently, you're not the only one who knows what it's like to lose someone while everyone around you acts like it's nothing. Emiko turned to her. My brother was killed when I was 17, Celeste said. Police said it was a misunderstanding. He fit a description. They never apologized. My family couldn't afford a lawyer. It felt like the world just moved on, like he never mattered. She looked away. That's why I don't talk much at work. Sometimes silence is the only way you stay standing. They sat together in the quiet, holding their losses like sisters. But grief isn't the end of a story. Sometimes it's the place where truth begins. The next day, room 409 felt different. Not cleaner, not brighter, just warmer. Something had shifted. Word had already spread that Celeste and the Japanese woman had spent hours talking. By the time Celeste walked past the lobby that morning, 2 front desk clerks were whispering near the computer. I didn't even know Celeste could speak Japanese. Since when? Guess you never bothered to ask. Upstairs, Emiko was already waiting at her door, hands clasped, a small smile on her face. Celeste gave a playful nod. Ready? They sat down again, but this time it wasn't tea and silence. Emiko had a small notepad in her hand. She was writing in both English and Japanese. Is this a speech? Celeste asked. Emiko looked up, sheepish. More like a message. A message for who? Emiko hesitated. Everyone, but mostly for myself. Celeste leaned forward. Want me to help? That afternoon, Emiko asked to speak with the hotel staff. Not everyone, just the ones who'd had to deal with her directly. The manager, the clerks, a couple housekeepers. Celeste arranged it. They met in the conference room on the second floor. Plastic chairs, a stale pot of coffee in the corner. Nothing fancy. Everyone was polite, but stiff. Emiko stood at the front of the room, Celeste beside her. I know. I have been a problem, Emiko said slowly in English. Her accent was strong, but her eyes were steady. The manager shifted in his seat. That's not... Celeste held up a hand gently. Let her talk. Emiko continued. I did not come here to be difficult. I came here because my brother died. Alone. Here. In this city. She paused, letting the weight of that land. I do not speak English well. I tried, but it is hard to speak when you are also carrying pain. My phone cannot translate pain. The room went quiet. Celeste translated Emiko's words into smoother English when needed, but most of the time she didn't have to. The message was clear. Emiko looked around the room, eyes soft. I am not asking for pity. I am only asking for kindness, for someone to look past what they do not understand. She turned to Celeste, who nodded back at her. The manager finally spoke. Ms. Tanaka, we didn't know. I didn't know. If I had, you would have treated me different, she said calmly. But that is the problem, yes? He lowered his eyes. One of the housekeepers, an older woman named Rena, leaned forward. We were wrong. I judged you without even trying to know you. I'm sorry. Others nodded. Celeste glanced at Emiko, then stepped forward herself. This woman flew across the world to mourn someone who didn't even get a proper goodbye. She walked into a hotel, hoping to feel safe enough to grieve. Instead, we made her feel small, like she didn't belong here. She let that hang. I know what that feels like. A lot of us do. Maybe it's time we stop deciding who deserves kindness based on how easy they are to understand. Silence. Then slow, soft applause. Not loud, not performative. Just real. Emiko looked like she might cry again, but this time it wasn't sadness. It was relief. But healing doesn't always come without change. And sometimes the people who teach us the most don't stay long. By Thursday morning, room 409 was empty. Emiko had checked out before sunrise. No farewell speech, no big send-off. Just a quiet checkout with the night clerk, a handwritten thank you note left on the counter, and a soft bow no one saw. Celeste didn't find out until she got to work at 8:15. She walked straight to the 4th floor with fresh towels in hand, same routine. But when she reached room 409 and knocked, there was no answer. She tried again, then unlocked it with the housekeeping key. The room was spotless. Bed made, trash empty, bathroom wiped down, as if Emiko had cleaned it herself. On the nightstand was a small envelope. Celeste picked it up slowly. Her name was written across the front in black ink. Neat, delicate, intentional. She sat on the edge of the bed and opened it. Inside was a note, written half in Japanese, half in English. No translation app this time, just real words, in her own handwriting. Celeste-san, you were the first person to see me. Not what I wore, not what I struggled to say. You saw me. Because of you, I remembered that I am more than silence. Please accept this gift, not for money, but for meaning. I hope you never forget your voice is powerful. With respect and thanks, Emiko. Folded inside the note was a cashier's check. Celeste stared at the number, breath caught in her throat. $30,000. She sat there frozen, not from the money, but what it represented. Celeste could still hear Emiko's voice in her mind, could still feel the small weight of her grief. She had never expected anything in return. All she did was listen. But Emiko had given her more than money. She'd given her purpose. Later that day, the manager found Celeste in the break room, staring out the window, note still in her pocket. He cleared his throat awkwardly. Hey, I heard about the check. Celeste didn't look at him. Yeah. I also heard what you did for her, for real. He paused. I didn't know you spoke Japanese. I didn't know anything, really. Celeste looked over. You never asked. He nodded slowly. That's on me. Then a pause. Listen, there's a front desk job opening next month, bilingual pay. You interested? Celeste blinked. That was the first time he'd ever looked her in the eyes like she mattered. She didn't say yes, not right away. She just smiled slightly. I'll think about it. But Emiko wasn't the only one who checked out changed. 3 weeks passed. Room 409 had been cleaned and flipped half a dozen times since Emiko left. Guests came and went. The front desk stayed busy. The staff kept working like always. But something felt different. People paused more. The front desk started keeping a stack of printed local maps in multiple languages. Celeste noticed housekeeping was more patient when guests struggled with English. Even the kitchen staff tried learning a few basic greetings in Japanese, Spanish, and French. And Celeste? She took the front desk position, didn't even hesitate when the offer came again, showed up in her best blouse and her mother's old watch, silent proof of who she was and where she came from. She still cleaned rooms once a week by choice, said it helped her stay grounded. One day, a couple from Tokyo walked in, confused and looking tired. The husband had a thick folder of papers. The wife kept nervously checking her phone. Before the clerk beside her could say anything, Celeste stood and smiled gently. Then, in smooth, comfortable Japanese, she said, "Welcome. Don't worry, I'll help you." The man's face broke into visible relief. His wife looked like she might cry. The other clerk just stared. Later that night, he said, "I didn't even know you could speak that well." Celeste smiled. "That's because most people never ask about what they don't expect you to know." People didn't see everything. They didn't see the quiet brilliance behind a Maid uniform. They didn't see the pain behind Emiko's silence. They didn't see the connections waiting to be made because they didn't bother to look beyond surface-level assumptions. But sometimes, all it takes is one moment of kindness, one person willing to speak your language, to remind you that you matter, to remind you that you're not invisible. If you've ever felt ignored, overlooked, or misjudged, remember, you're not alone. Sometimes your voice might be the only one someone else can hear. Use it. Use it with love. Use it with courage. Use it when no one else will. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs reminding that their voice matters. And the next time you meet someone who struggles to be heard, slow down and listen. You never know what story they're carrying.